Love podcasts, hate nonsense. The PoliticsJOE podcast, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, would we describe that as an Icelandic football clap?
Yeah, a Viking clap.
Yeah, love that. Love that. Seán Hickey, Laura Beveridge.
Hello.
Morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Starting pre 9 a.m.
I know. Can you believe it?
I know.
So Laura can get out early.
Yeah.
Because you're off to?
At West Sussex, to the oldest, population-wise, the oldest town in Britain, which has a median age of 65.
Very good. Very good. Asking the old people what they think.
Mm.
It's important to hear what the old people think.
Yeah, no one ever asks them. So.
They only command our political economy. We're finding out what they think.
Meet the 3 people and be there for 3 hours.
Good
I
week.
haven't spoken to a child in a long time.
Oh, my sweet summer child. Hello. Let me tell you about my life. Thank you for asking. How are we? Good weekends?
Fantastic weekend.
Missed you both yesterday.
Oh, I missed you too.
I missed you all weekend, Seán.
I had a fantastic weekend not thinking about you, but when I came back to London yesterday, I missed you a lot.
Right.
A lot.
Oh, it's when you're in the city, you think.
Yeah. It just, I segment my life into Dublin and London lives. And when I come back to London,
All
I
you can
remember
think
all of the
about-
people I know in London.
All you can think about is me specifically.
Yes.
Great.
Yeah. Well, you're the first that I think of.
Naturally. Laura, good weekend?
Great weekend. I saw Charlie XCX.
Any good?
It was amazing, and I'm very sorry that I wasn't thinking about you.
Was that Charlie XCX thinking about my boss? Thinking about work. Yeah, no, I think for the best, you probably weren't thinking about work. Favorite song in the set?
Ooh, Von Dutch, I think.
Okay,
That was fun.
nice. How long was she on stage for?
I think she finished her set 20 minutes early.
Oh.
Which was a bit strange, but the most fun part is like there was actually a way more interesting conversation happening behind me than the Charlie XCX concert, which was there was a guy and a girl who had attended together. We'd established that they were in some form of relationship. They were dating. During the set, he was explaining to her that he no longer wanted to be monogamous and that he was actually polyamorous. And this whole conversation ended up with her apologizing to him for not realizing.
Not realizing he was poly.
Yeah.
What does your poly radar look like? How does one detect a poly
He said
person?
that he was really proud of himself for not having cheated on her before having before having told her that he was polyamorous. So it was quite hard to pay attention to the set when like this was happening behind us.
Outstanding.
And what was it about Charlie X? The aircon's going off. And what was it about Charlie XCX playing Guess that made him realise he wanted to be polyamorous and sleep with somebody else, I wonder?
Quite Brat Summer of him.
Yeah, it is quite Brat Summer, isn't it?
I'd say so, yeah. We are a it's now bubbling.
There's a guy smoking a bong in here. Kicking off.
We're
Okay.
positive on this podcast.
Yeah, no, of course we're polypositive, you know. To each their own. To each their own. But the whole... I think I deserve a round of applause for not cheating on you is a little bit...
Yeah, it was quite insane.
A little bit taxing.
Did the conversation end amicably?
Oh yeah, well she was like apologizing to him, like he got off scot-free.
So do you think she's going to be part of the polycule?
Well, it sounded like she wanted to be monogamous with him,
Right.
but like she was going to let him do what he wanted to do to stay with him.
Right.
Yeah, it was very hard for me and my friend not to like intervene with the conversation.
Staged intervention.
Yeah.
Christ. Oh, well. The world's gone mad.
No, it's not.
I think it has.
It's completely fine. You're allowed to do that.
Imagine explain someone
2025.
Yeah, imagine explain someone in the year 2000. First of all, like about the sort of proliferation of day festivals in London, and then
Can't swing a cat for hitting a park that has.
then explaining who Charlie XCX is and what Brat Summer is, and then
I don't think that's too far.
And then at the possibility of the rejuvenation of Brat Summer 2.0, in fact, that two people were more interested in the male partner in the relationship was more interested in trying to procure a harem And
Sultan Dave.
yes, and Dave's first wife consentingly was like, "Crack on, buddy."
Mhm.
And then, I guess, like, Von Dutch plays.
There must have been a pop cultural moment in the early 2000s that was adjacent to that kind of thing. It was just not as, because we didn't have social media back then.
It's like the
It
Venga
wasn't
Boys, isn't it? It's like Butlins. It's like Club 1830, and everyone having like group sex in someone's chalet.
Yes,
That's what
exactly
the
like
equivalent
that.
is. It's like
Yeah,
it's keys in the bowl. It's not.
Mm.
Let me dress this up
You know-
in woke therapized language
Yeah.
to make you accept it.
I only found out recently that an upside down pineapple signifies a swinger's house.
Mm.
I didn't know. And then what's the other thing? The
People say pampas grass, but
pampas grass in the front garden.
I think that's just more the aesthetics of swinging. I think it just, sort of middle class Brits in their 50s have a thing for pampas grass
Mm.
and also have a thing for swinging. And so I don't think it's like a signal in the same way that the pineapple possibly is.
I feel like, because it is also the bowl next to the door for the keys, right? So you see the
But I
pampas
have a
grass.
bowl next to the door for the like, everyone has a bowl for
But do you
keys.
have pampas grass though?
No,
Yeah,
I have taste.
Fair, you're fine.
Yeah, okay,
You're fine. If you have pampas grass, you knock on the door, you take a peek inside the door when they answer. If there's no bowl next to the door, you walk away.
Off you go. You're on your way. Sorry, and if there was, would you just walk into the house and be like, I'm here for the gangbang?
Is there an upside down pineapple around here?
I saw a TikTok actually the weekend of a guy on a cruise ship who, feigning ignorance, was wearing a shirt that had pineapple prints on it, some of which were upside down. And he was in his sort of 20s and 30s, young guy in good shape. And like all of these sort of 50, 60-year-old women were walking past and like stroking him on the shoulder. Yeah. Right, to business, because you need to get to West Sussex. So we were tight
Like
turnaround.
now, really?
Yeah, well, probably maybe in half an hour or so. It's time. PoliticsJOE Premium, JOEnlyFans.
JOEnlyFans.
JOEnlyFans is here.
How long did it take to come up with that yesterday?
I didn't come up with it yesterday.
No.
So I trailed it at the end of my Rachel Reeves monologue.
Mm-hmm.
At which point somebody in the subreddit said, "I can't wait to subscribe to JOEnlyFans," and I was like, "That's better than
Shout out to them.
PolJOE
Good
Premium."
work.
There's a couple of claims to it. There's a couple of users who are claiming it as their own, is what I would say. But look, I think we probably can't call it JOEnlyFans because, well, I feel like Patreon probably aren't that hot on us sort of signaling they're one of their main competitors.
That's fair.
But it's certainly better than Premium.
Is there much OnlyFans style content on Patreon?
Yeah. So when I've been going through all of this stuff, there's like relentless checkboxes. That's like, do you produce content for over 18 audiences? And then when you're reading like the sort of best practices and, can I set up this type of membership? Can I do that? There are relentless warnings being like, this facility is not available to adult content creators. This facility is not available to adult content creators.
No tits and ass. No tits and ass.
Yeah, no. Well, this is the thing though, but full hole.
But full hole?
No, I'm just, I'm
No curves, only only close-up shots.
yeah. It's ambiguous.
Yeah.
It's ambiguous. You don't know what it could be. No, we won't be posting things like that on ours.
Not yet.
1 million Patreons.
Yeah, but
I've seen what Ed's been up to.
if we reach tipping point, then yeah, maybe. But I mean, it is a point though. I mean, there is no, we can post whatever we want on there.
Mhm.
There is no content moderation because it is people who are signing up for our stuff. So you're not beholden to sort of what YouTube or Instagram deems appropriate content. Channel 5 News, Andrew Callaghan is probably like the classic example of this when he goes to sort of those like unhinged sort of like swamp fests. It's actually called that. I think the festival is called Swamp Fest, where people are like, there's just full frontal nudity, drug use, etc. On, I think he uses Patreon. On his subscription platform, you can see everything. They don't have to censor it to conform to our tech overlords. So that's a benefit. Means I can go full dogs, take the dogs for a walk, on there.
Populate that fee finder account.
Yeah, give them some ammunition. Give my WikiFeet page some ammunition. But there were some people asking about like the rationale and the business model for doing this on the subreddit, which I feel like I should talk about a little bit, maybe. I'm not going to like give people like specific numbers because obviously some of it's a bit commercially sensitive, but to give you like a sense of scale, the on audio platforms we have about half the audience, half the listenership that we get on YouTube. So the audience is twice as big on YouTube, and yet on audio we generate about 4 times as much revenue. So, but essentially by a factor of 8. For every play that you get audio-wise, you're making 8 times as much cash as you are on YouTube. Like the economics of publishing on YouTube really aren't there. And in the same way, people are saying, "Oh, you know, why don't you do a YouTube membership? You know, because they have their subscription package." Well, if you
They take a cut, don't they?
They take 30%.
30%.
Yes. YouTube takes 30%. So you're kind of part of the rationale for doing this is so that we, for the same piece of content, we have a different tech overlord who provides us with slightly more favorable terms than that one. I mean, yeah, look, I didn't want to put, and we won't, promise, put the whole podcast behind a paywall. Like, I think it's very important to me. I do believe it serves a purpose, like with some public value in what we're doing. I don't think it's the right thing to do to say the only way you can watch, listen, other than, 30-second clips is if you pay for it. I don't want to do that, which is why we're still keeping it free to listen on audio, full-length episodes, where you get served adverts. And that's the flip side as well, is if you pay the subscription, you won't get adverts. It's kind of the thinking behind it. I think nice tummy rumble there, Seán. I think that's kind of that's sort of like the business rationale. That's like the financial side, part of the motivation for doing this, basically. Yeah,
And
it's a lot more fun on there.
Yeah, and it will
got group
enable us
chats.
to do more fun things as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there is a group chat. I need to set it up. I've sort of been hesitant, but you can literally, every time someone joins, it's like, do you want to message them and say thank you? And I'm like, do I want to message them?
Hey, kiss.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you're here.
Yeah. Thanks for signing up. Here are my feet. No, it is good. Yeah, group chats. We'll do some live streams there for sure. Q&A functionality. I don't want it to be. It's like a different community, but I think it's slightly more unhinged, a bit more fun, and obviously then the live events and early access to live event tickets is where we really come into our own. So, people were asking, will we do shows outside of London? And the answer to that is definitely yes. Yeah, for sure. Obviously, you wait to see where people are, but we've got a Manchester office, so I've got no doubt we would do a show in Manchester, and we'd probably do one in Scotland as well.
Dublin, so I can go home.
so Seán could go home. Do you know what? When we look at the audience, geographic distribution of the audience,
Big old audience in Ireland.
I was about to say the complete opposite.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well,
He's saying that because he wants to go there.
In comparison to France,
Yeah,
we've got a big audience.
in comparison to France, but it's like it's comparable, like in terms of raw numbers. America, Australia, and Ireland are kind of all in the same ballpark.
I think Australia has a lot more, doesn't it?
I do. You're right.
It's America. And
Australia's bigger,
yeah.
which is funny because of the population size is obviously smaller compared to America. Yeah.
So live show in Australia.
I think there's a good case to be made for that.
If enough people join the Patreon and we can fly the crew over there, then yeah, why not? That's the other thing, as I kind of underestimated yesterday. I said I'd give Ed a pint for every Patreon that signs up, and
You owe him something like 100 and
yeah. So I'm gonna have to figure that out today.
He still hasn't finished the one you gave him yesterday.
No, it's still on his desk. He's gonna be drinking for some time. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's the Patreon. So sign up.
Do that. It's great crack.
Do be doing that.
Ed's doing another cut of his porn awards from last year of all the bits that he couldn't put on YouTube.
Yeah. That's soon, next porn awards. I think it might be this week or next week.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
We're not allowed to cover it. They won't let a camera in, but they did invite us. They said, if you just want to come,
Right.
you just want to come to the party.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Which would be pretty
I believe
unhinged.
the Irish Bull was in touch with Ed about it.
Always is, isn't he?
Yeah.
Always is. Okay, shall we move things on? Let's talk about yesterday. I mean, so much news. You sort of reaching around being like, are we going to do Israel and Iran? But I think the grooming gangs inquiry and what happened in the Commons yesterday is probably the place to start. Laura, could you just, before we get into kind of what was in the Casey report, can you just give us a sense of sort of over the last year, well, 6 months this year, like this calendar year, what happened? Because obviously January time, we're all starting off with sort of Elon Musk tweeting about kind of the rape of Britain. He accused Jess Phillips of being a rape genocide apologist, if I remember correctly. And that kind of brought this story, this horror, back into public discourse, didn't it?
Yeah, and I think at that time, or for the last 6 months really, we've seen the Labour government deny any need for a national inquiry.
Yep.
Although they did have launched about 5 local inquiries, and they also launched this audit led by Baroness Casey into, I guess, what the sort of state of group-based child exploitation is like in the UK. And specifically, she was looking at the data that they could gather, but a lot of the data is incomplete. It's very inconsistent. Like the way that ethnicity is recorded varies massively. And when it is recorded, it's only recorded in about 1/3 of instances of this crime. But what, sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, in previous sort of discussions, there's a lot of gets made about a Home Office report in 2020 looking into if there was a correlation between ethnicity and propensity for committing this type of crime. And the conclusion of that was the data is not reliable enough for us to be able to draw any kind of conclusion. No one should try and draw a conclusion about this. And with the hindsight of the position we're now in, and in relation to the remarks that, for example, Dominic Cummings has been making recently about, he alleges that civil servants deliberately have tried to cover the sort of scope and sort of horror of this, tried to cover it up, is that kind of obscuring of ethnic data. Does that serve a kind of, everyone goes, well, we can't draw any conclusions about sort of propensity for doing this because the data isn't reliable enough. And I think Casey is kind of one of the recommendations is that it sort of has to be mandatory, the reporting of ethnicity, right?
Definitely, because she said the information that they received from 3 of the UK's biggest police forces, including Greater Manchester Police, did suggest that there was a disproportionate number of male suspects of Asian or Pakistani background. But she said this was based on local data and there's a lack of comprehensive national data. She actually called it an appalling lack of data on ethnicity and crime, and that this incomplete data was being used to suit each side's own ends, and that this issue had become a political football. And one of the things that she made one of the points she made as to why it was so key to start recording this ethnicity data is because right now this incomplete data is a disservice both to victims and to the law-abiding Asian community. Is that something that you would agree with?
Yeah, I think so. I think misogyny is universal, right? And I think it's really important when we have conversations about this to acknowledge that. It might present itself in different social, economic, and cultural contexts. It might present itself differently, but it serves. You have to appreciate that misogyny sort of transcends like ethnicity, right? And in the same way, when we look at previous sexual abuse scandals in the UK, whether that's in the Catholic Church, whether that's Jimmy Savile or other VIPs, Boy Scouts, etc., the perpetrators are not racialized in the same way that they are racialized in this instance. No one's going, white British men commit the majority of child sexual abuse, so really should we do white guys have a problem? Do white guys have a cultural problem? No one does that. And so I want to kind of There's a lot I want to say about this, and primarily for me, I think it's that the focus of government, the focus of people talking about this, has to be on the victims first and foremost, right? It has to be on their class background. The reality is that a lot of these girls were poor, working class, vulnerable girls from council estates, and as a result, quite often when they came in and spoke about what was happening to them, whether that was with the police or other people, they weren't believed. In some instances, the police dropped them back to their abusers, said, come back when you're not drunk, type thing. And so it's those left behind women and girls where I think most of our attention and action is needed. Everyone talks about how fear of being accused of racism and political correctness essentially shut down a real conversation about this. But the truth is nobody in power cared because these girls were poor. I think that's what it is. I think that's certainly a part of it. Both things can be a part of it. I think it's a story about class invisibility, and as much as it is about possibly racism and cultural sensitivities. And to your point, I think people have made like a pretty catastrophic mistake in letting the right dominate this issue, because what are we talking about here at the end of the day? Like, fighting child sexual exploitation should be a progressive cause. We're talking about predatory behavior. We're talking about institutional power against some of the most vulnerable people in our society. When you couch it in those terms, how is it anything other than a progressive cause defending those victims? And to your point, I don't think treating certain groups with kid gloves because we're scared of sort of the consequences does no one any favors. Like, it does those groups actually a disservice, right? Like, you're essentially you're prioritizing the politics of embarrassment over the mass organized rape of children. Like, what purpose does that serve? It doesn't serve anyone or anything, and if it's true that in this specific type of crime that Pakistani men are overrepresented, then we have to understand why. Is it because of power? Is it because of money? Is it because of, I've said this before, I think one of the most obvious common denominators to me is working in the nighttime economy, because it provides access to vulnerable women and girls in states of intoxication, inebriation. It might be working in a takeaway, in an off license as a taxi driver. Is that a common denominator? Do we need to understand why and what that's doing? Is it because of cultural attitudes? And this is the part that obviously people kind of, the hairs on the back of their neck stand up and they don't want to talk about, right? Pakistan is ranked 145th out of 146 in the World Economic Forum's Global Gender Gap Index in 2023. There are honor killings in Pakistan. The female literacy rate is about 50%. Like, you can't shy away from those facts. Is it because of something else entirely that all of us are missing in this conversation? I think all of those things are like very important to talk about in this. And the primary one that I would say, Laura, and I appreciate you said, do I agree with this? And I've sort of spoken for about 5 minutes here, is that misogyny is a universal and it transcends just the Pakistani community. And we should be very, very careful about racializing this, because the people that are doing that are doing it for political purposes.
Definitely. And I think one of the overlooked aspects of this is, like you said, misogyny isn't confined to certain ethnicities. And one of the overlooked aspects of this has been the misogyny of the police and of the British judicial system. And I think the Baroness Casey's report found that there was a systemic failure to recognise and protect children as victims of sexual abuse, because often these girls, because of their class background, because maybe they drank, maybe they smoked, maybe they swore, whatever, they weren't seen as children. The report says these girls weren't seen as children raped, rather they were seen as wayward teenagers. We also retain an ambivalent attitude to adolescent girls in society and the culture of many organisations. Basically, she was saying that we engage as a society often in the adultification of teenage girls around the ages of 13 to 16. And as a result of this, result in the British court system. Often when these cases did make it to courts, they were dropped or downgraded from cases of rape to being lesser charges, because these girls at 13 or 15 were seen to have consented to their own abuse. And often actually they were charged as co-conspirators. They were child prostitutes. The report references a mother now who's not allowed to go on holiday with her children because she is on the sex offenders register, because when she was a victim, she was also deemed to be a co-conspirator in her own abuse.
I've heard people very closely connected to this, but who will remain nameless for fear of legal action, speak about these girls in some of the most appalling terminology, described as sort of sluts and slags. And it's like, the rationale essentially goes, oh, well, she really wanted that new iPhone, right? And so she was prepared to do that in exchange for that, rather than, do we think she may have been vulnerable and that this constitutes grooming and abuse? And that kind of just misogyny that is layered through this. You can't, if someone only wants to talk about the ethnic background of the offenders and not talk about the victims, not put the victims at the forefront, and not talk about misogyny, I think their political purpose and intent is pretty obvious and discredited.
I mean, the police were found to be, or the Met at least, to be inherently misogynistic and racist. And I think that you can't underestimate the role that played in how these girls were dismissed by the police. And I think also, if you think back to that time in British culture as well, when you had characters like Vicky Pollard all over the TV, that's just what happens to these types of girls. Mm-hmm. These types of girls are only ever destined to be teenage mothers. And that was the view of not the Pakistani community, that was the view of British society and British culture from the highest level.
I don't think you can look past. Ash Sarkar spoke about this when she wrote about it in her book, and we spoke about it when I interviewed her a couple of months ago, that actually this kind of does mirror the transition in British media and British society from demonizing the white working class, genuinely Command F, like in a newspaper archive, chav. And then around about sort of 2015, 2016, as we get towards Brexit and this kind of populist moment, we go from the demonization to like the deification of the white working class. And instead of being Vicky Pollard, instead of being a chav, instead of being on Benefit Street, instead of being a scrounger and a cheat, they become this kind of like sacred cow of politics that's like, what about the forgotten white working class, right? And in the same way, rather than being sluts, slags who were prepared to give it up for an iPhone and people looking down their nose at them, they now become these kind of, rightly, these girls are now seen as victims, but you can't remove it from that context of the very obvious classism that categorized how British society as a whole thought about girls like this at that time.
Mm-hmm. And even yesterday, when you see how Kemi Badenoch is responding to the Yvette Cooper's speech, it's not even from the position of, even though we're still regarding, and we've changed how we talk about the white working classes in Britain, it's still from the point of view of talking about the perpetrators of the crimes rather than the victims themselves. Like, the victims are a secondary point in Kemi Badenoch's criticism of the government. And you mentioned earlier on, Laura, about how the review the review talks about how it's used as a political football. Hours later, it's used as a political football, and you see this theatre and this animation from Kemi Badenoch that you've not seen since she's become the leader of the Conservative Party. It just kind of hits home how distasteful politicians in general take the whole thing, how they've taken this entire situation, that it's not entirely the victims that they're focused on. It's whatever political agenda they can get across at that moment in time. I mean, you had a couple of Reform MPs yesterday as well talking about it. And it is two things. One being attacking the Labour Party for shooting down inquiries in the past, but also focusing on how Labour-led councils were the majority of the areas that these things happened in. And it just leaves the whole thing leaves a really bad taste in the mouth when you consider the gravity, seriousness, and systemic depravity of what happened.
Laura, I want to come to you and talk about reform's angle on this in a second, but I would just say, so your point, Seán, is that I think that is the most animated I've seen Kemi Badenoch in the Commons. I think it's probably the best speech she's given as leader of the opposition. But I can't look away from the political function and utility of this for her. And it is really, since Musk tweeted and proved that actually, social media does have a bearing on reality, actually, guys. And she started to make this kind of a hobby horse of her opposition. You can look back. Yes, it's true to say that the Conservatives in government did take some action in relation to this, whether it's commissioning the report, whether it's implementing some, not all, of its recommendations, and the work that Sajid Javid did on it. But Badenoch did not speak about this in the way that she does now when the Conservatives were in government. And you can't look past that fact. Equally, I would just say, while she wants to stoke division, while she wants to connect this to the Labour Party, and that's in response to when Yvette Cooper stands up, she tries to sort of take the emotion out of it, and she tries to pacify basically the statement and appeal for a cross-party consensus. Make no mistake, that also serves a political function for the Labour Party, because frankly, over the last 6 months, to go from saying people calling for this are on a far-right bandwagon, Lucy Powell, it's dog whistle politics, to no, actually, we are going to have a national inquiry into this, and hiding behind process. This is essentially... This should be a moral issue. It should be an issue of conscience. And instead, no, well, we've had to appoint Baroness Casey in order to come to produce a 200-page report. And in light of that report, we now agree it's right that we hold an inquiry. This is part of Starmer's problem. But make no mistake, there is a political function in Yvette Cooper speaking about it in those terms, because she absolutely does not want it to be emotion riddled. She absolutely does not want it to be blame attributing. Because if it does, they are the government of the day. A lot of these councils were Labour-run councils. It would get the Labour Party into very hot water. So it's not, we can't just say, oh, it's only the Tories using this as a political football, because Labour are trying to play it in that same way too. Laura, on reform and their contributions yesterday.
I think there's something really insidious about the way that reform are taking credit for pushing this inquiry.
What do you mean? Rupert Lowe's been tweeting about it incessantly. I suppose he's not part of the party anymore. Yeah, he's freelancing. What's his inquiry? What's he going to do now? No, this is happening. What's happening with all that crowdfunding, Rupert? What are you going to do with all that cash, brother?
But yeah, there's something really insidious about how they are taking credit for forcing the government's hand in this inquiry and claiming to be the champion of women and girls when one of their MPs has been convicted for assaulting his partner, when Nigel Farage has previously associated with Andrew Tate, who had credible allegations against him and now has been charged for the exact same behaviours that we see being pointed out in Baroness Casey's report, such as the lover boy tactics of grooming women. It's just beyond belief that they're trying to claim that they are the champion of women and girls when their record very much shows that they are not.
Yeah, charges which, of course, Andrew Tate denies. But you're right, Laura. It's just kind of sickening, isn't it, to see people kind of the brass neck of it, the gall, to kind of very happy to glad hand with some very unsavoury characters, and then be like, no, we are the champion of women and girls. Do you know? It's just it's kind of sickening.
Can I make a point on the ethnicity aspect?
Yeah, man, of course.
When I was reading it, and the whole way through, I mean, I didn't live in the UK when this became a news story, and it's kind of existed in the background of my mind since living here. But one thing that I'm reminded of when it's coming to this story today, or yesterday in particular, is, do you remember in 2021 when we had the preliminary report on COVID deaths? And there was the finding that Afro-Caribbean people and Bangladeshi people were most likely to die from COVID. And the way that it was trailed in the media was as though ethnically these people were more likely to die that like there was something in the genetic makeup of Afro-Caribbean people and Bangladeshi people that made them more susceptible to die from COVID, rather than, and on your point earlier on of, in this instance, how the nighttime economy might have a massive impact on how people from South Asian and Pakistani communities are disproportionately the perpetrators of the crimes in the report. It interests me how the media and political landscape in Britain picks ethnicity to kind of absolve from cultural and socioeconomic kind of barriers, or how people's economic, social, political landscape influences their behaviors, and rather just pins it on groups themselves and absolves the state and absolves community and absolves politics from any action of anybody.
Yeah,
so,
and
like,
their own prejudice. Yeah,
and exactly. So, like, I mean, the overlying thing when it came to Bangladeshi and Afro-Caribbean communities was that they work in key worker roles, and so they were more likely to be to come across COVID during the pandemic, and then they were more likely to die from COVID as a result. But that's not how it's marked.
Yeah, it's framed as if like there's some kind of like genetic weakness.
Right? Yeah, and it seems like it's
implied,
the same with this as well. Is that like there is a genetic susceptibility to being a sexual predator?
Yeah, it's the same thing. Like you look at childbirth outcomes, right, and the frightening rate at which Black women are more likely to die in childbirth than white women. And do you think that's because there's some kind of genetic difference in how Black people give birth, or do you think it's more likely that actually when they're in hospital, Black women aren't taken as seriously by their caregivers when they say that they're in pain, or that they're worried that something bad is happening, or that something is going wrong? It's probably the latter. Yeah, good point.
And I think Baroness Casey's report, like, obviously what's made the headlines is all the stuff about ethnicity, and ethnicity data is going to be collected. But in the report, she says that there needs to be research commissioned into the drivers of group-based child sexual exploitation, including the role of social media, cultural factors, and group dynamics. And she specifically highlights the role of taxi licenses and looking at how they are licensed and if there should be closer speculation and regulation of them.
Yeah, all valid points. Yeah, I think just generally sort of useful thing to say is like beware racialized framings in relation to most things. And I think certainly there's a lot more to this than just British Pakistani men. Do they have a greater proclivity for raping white girls? Like, I think there's probably a lot more going on there, lads. And anyone that tries to tell you that that's the case, or is seeking to simplify this, is probably doing it for nefarious political purposes. Laura, you need to go to Sussex.
To Sussex.
We march on Sussex. Thank you both for your time. A pleasure to podcast with you.
Great to see you again, Ollie.
Great to see you again. Yeah, great to see me in reality and not just in your mind's eye now that you're back in London. Thank you very much for listening. See you on the flippy. JOEnlyFans is coming. Why didn't I think of that when I wrote that down? JOEnlyFans is coming, and we're asking for your help. If you like our journalism and want us to carry on making more of it, consider supporting us for the price of a cheap pizza once a month, £2 a week. Head to Patreon, where you'll get first dibs on live event tickets, access to our PolJOE group chat, Q&As, and exclusive content. Go to patreon.com/PoliticsJOE, where exclusively for you, our pod freaks can use code POD to get 90% off your first month. That's code POD, P-O-D, for 90% off your first month on patreon.com/PoliticsJOE. And for a limited time only, as we joked yesterday, for every new sign up, I will give 1 pint to Ed Campbell. He's calculated that his desk can accommodate 267 pint cans. He figured out that the average diameter of a can was 6 centimeters, which I feel like might be undercooking it a little bit, and then worked out the square meterage of his desk. So let's put that to the test.
There's no way it's 267.
We'll see.
Yeah.
I mean, I have to source more than 100 pints today and put them on his desk. So we're going to find out quite quickly.